I hate to say it, but I think the BC real estate market is effectively screwed with low supply, massive down payments required to buy a home, and new policies that the government is considering that could make it even harder to buy a home. I think BC's real estate market could be in trouble over the next couple of years. The definitive guide on how to manage your credit, product, penalty, price in that order. It's never been more important to get your mortgage right. Okay, so welcome back. Let's discuss BC's real estate market because there is a lot going on out there. There is historically low levels of supply in the real estate market. There's guys who are needing to win the lottery in order to win their down payment or have a down payment. And there's all sorts of other stuff going on at levels of government that are designed in such a way that is good-natured and well-intended. However, they could have drastic effects on the real estate market and not in the way that is intended. So that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. But before we get into it, do me that favor, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and please hit that like button so more people like you can see this video. And don't forget about our race to 25,000 subscribers, where when we hit 25,000 subscribers, and we're getting closer and closer and closer every day, we're going to give away $5,000 to one lucky winner to maybe use as a down payment, for example. But in order to win, you have to be subscribed. So go ahead, click that subscribe button. It's free, it's easy, it's definitely worth it. And it gives you the chance to win that $5,000. So let's get into it. Let's discuss everything that's going on in the BC real estate market. I have a feeling that government policies, things that are going on there, are going to lead to continued higher prices if we don't see something happening soon. And yes, there is this belief that higher interest rates are going to lead to lower home prices and so on and so forth. But I think that you have to consider, especially in BC's case, that people have been qualifying at essentially 4.5% to 5% for the last 5 years. And any increases in real estate prices aren't going to really change the qualifying amounts, which means they could go even higher and higher and higher. So let's take a look at the news. Let's see what's going on in the BC real estate market this week. And this is an addition to our normal BC real estate update. We aren't going to go through the Vancouver stats, but we're going to go through basically 3 or 4 articles that are somewhat alarming when it comes to the real estate market out there. So first and foremost, BC real estate market. For 2 residents, it took winning the lottery to buy their first homes. And this talks about 2 separate lotto winners, completely unrelated, but they both won $500,000 prizes in the lotto and used those to buy down payments. They basically said, if they weren't able to have those down payments via the lottery winnings, that they wouldn't have been able to buy at all. And, really interesting article. Now, this is cool because this is where you get different headlines that lead you into articles that are talking about different things. And I didn't realize as I clicked on this article that what they're actually leading into to talk about here is the CIBC report from Benjamin Tell with respect to gifted down payments. Now, that report basically said that on average, Canadians are getting about $82,000 gifted from relatives, immediate family members, so on and so forth. And that it's becoming largely the way that people get their down payments in Canada for housing. At least 30% of people are getting gifted down payments from relatives in order to actually be able to buy a house. Now, what's interesting, if you scroll down in this article and you look at it, it's actually significantly higher in the Vancouver area. It takes about $160,000 in gifted down payment in the Vancouver area, or sorry, it doesn't take that much, but that's the average that families are giving their relatives in that market. Now, before we go into the other articles and talk about this, I see this as a major place where consumers need help. And in generating those down payments, I think that is the single biggest problem that most people have. About 70% of people still have to generate their down payments on their own. So we put together a down payment accelerator boot camp to help people with that. And really the gist of it is if you want to accelerate your down payment, I will trade you $97 for $1,000. In other words, it costs $97 to be part of our down payment accelerator bootcamp, but I'll give you $1,000 if you end up choosing Mortgage 360. And on top of that, I'm going to show you ways to generate an extra $5,000 in a 30-day period by tying up the leaks in your finances, finding ways to use government programs to assist you in getting a down payment faster. And then on top of everything else, and the single most important way is to have some accountability and to start making additional money that isn't tied to your 9-to-5 job. Now that is all coming up. It starts on November 15th, but really timely because what we're seeing in BC especially is that saving a down payment is becoming the single biggest obstacle to home ownership. So I want to help with that. That's part of my why, to thrive and give back. I'm giving back by trying to help you thrive and get those down payments faster. Now, going on to the next article here, not talking so much about down payments, but talking about low supply. And this is an article out of Fernie where basically ferny ski staff and locals are struggling to afford housing because of how popular that market is and how limited of the supply there is. And this is becoming common in small, especially resort towns across BC. Housing prices keep going up, and as housing prices go up, they tend to go up more in areas that are very much tourism oriented. And as a result, what you're seeing is the people who make the tourism possible are getting priced out of the market. In fact, they talk here about one individual who has a $500 a month budget. He's trying to find a house that he can share with other people so he can meet that budget, but it just is impossible to find because they get swept up like that. And then locals as well are having a hard time finding housing as other people come in, tourists come in, or recreational owners come in and purchase out the properties. Now, this tends to be something that is happening across BC because here we have the British Columbia Real Estate Association that is talking about housing market supply at historically low levels. Now, this gets really, really concerning for me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll up here and I'm going to zoom into this chart because this one is something that I just think can't go without some consideration. This is, and I'm going to go back out here a little bit more. This is how low can they go? Total active listings seasonally adjusted. Now, this is what really concerns me. If you think back to when the big price run-ups were in BC, it was in the early 2000s leading up to 2006, 2007. That is this time period here. And there was about 25 to 30,000 listings at any given time in that time period. Here's where we are today. We're getting down close to 20,000 available listings. Now, this is seasonally adjusted. And what this tells me is that we're going to see another big price run up in BC because when there is that limited amount of supply, it's going to create a market where demand outpaces supply and therefore housing prices go up. So if you're in the BC market right now, expect that we're going to see a little bit more craziness for a little bit longer. And I don't know if interest rates going up are going to hedge this, especially when you see listings go this low. And keep in mind, back in 2003, 2004, 2005, interest rates were around 3-4%. So they were considerably higher than what they are today, which means we've got this combined low inventory and super low interest rate environment, which could cause this to go higher. So this is concerning to me. But here's what's really concerning to me. This is the new BC government's proposed legislation about putting in cooling off periods for soaring real estate prices to prevent soaring real estate prices. And I'm going to tell you unequivocally right out of the gate, this is not going to help. This is going to cause problems beyond belief for BC real estate buyers. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why. Now, if they do this smartly, it could work. But if it ends up being a cooling off period that is similar to what happens in new housing, what this could do is create even higher housing prices and lower supply and could have unintended consequences. So let's talk first of all about what a cooling off period is. It's basically a period of time with condos, typically in Canada, it's about 10 days, where you can write an offer and then you have time to think about it. Because what ends up happening, especially with new home sales and timeshares and those sorts of things, is you walk in not expecting to buy something, you get a high-end professional salesperson in a high-end professional show home showing you a property and you go, oh, I'm in love, and you end up buying something that you didn't intend on buying. It ends up being an impulse buy, and then you end up having buyer's regret the next morning. So you end up in this scenario where you have this 10-day cooling off period so that you can basically get out of those purchases. And sometimes it's not 10 days, sometimes it's shorter periods of time. But what the BC government is suggesting is that they're going to implement this for all housing. And here's where this creates a problem. If you have a builder that has a bunch of inventory and you have a 10-day cooling off period, they can sell other houses at the same time, and they can basically they can sell another property to somebody else who comes into the show home after you. However, there's some pretty negative consequences associated with doing this for the broader market. First and foremost, for the sellers, you could end up having multiple offers over a period of time where people just are locking up your house and then taking a cooling off period and backing out of it with no intention of ever buying it. The other thing that you could have, and this is the big problem, and this is what would reduce supply even more, is you could have buyers going out there and running around and going, okay, well, these are the top 3 properties that we like, so we're going to write offers on all 3 of them, and then we're going to decide, we're going to lock them up, secure them for ourselves, and then we're going to decide which one we actually want. So what ends up happening is you have 2 homes that are off the market, makes the market seem like there's even less properties that are available on the market, and ends up basically increasing prices by lowering supply even more because you've got this artificial cooling off period. Now, there are cooling off periods in other countries. Australia, for example, has one. They're popular in the UK. The big thing there, though, is that when you have a cooling off period in many of these other markets, you also have a penalty in order to basically break the contract. Now, that would be fine if that were the case in Canada. That would make the problem less severe. However, if you have real estate investors and the cooling off period breaking fee is 0.25% or 1% and it ends up being $2,500 or $5,000, what you'll end up having is you'll have real estate investors who go in, start locking up properties, and then they look at that breaking fee or that penalty fee as just a cost of doing business. So it ends up allowing real estate investors to go into a community and say, okay, we're going to lock up the whole community for 10 days. We know that we're going to have a certain amount of breakage penalties, and it can lead to even worse results. So I'm not going to say that this is all bad and not provide an alternative and a means of doing this that would actually work. But here's the reality. A cooling off period affects individual home sellers. It affects individual buyers. If they can't find homes, it's a bad idea. The way to do this properly is not to say, okay, you have a cooling off period, but to say, okay, you have a mandatory right to a home inspection. And then what this does is it creates a scenario where you have a buyer who comes in, they have to pay their $500 for the home inspection. They actually have to do it. And it gives them the right to inspect the property a second time, go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and actually make sure that it is the right property for them. And this would be a far better solution than just putting in a carte blanche cooling off period that also affects the sellers. Because you have to remember, when you're dealing with builders versus home buyers, you're dealing with a corporation versus buyers, and it makes sense to protect the buyers with a cooling off period. But when you start mandating it for consumer versus consumer, so seller and buyer, you start affecting the consumer who's selling in a negative way while giving the buyer an advantage. So this just doesn't make sense. It's bad policy. I sincerely hope that as they go through their consultation period, they realize this and they realize that the better alternative is to mandate financing conditions or home inspection conditions, not to provide a carte blanche cooling off period with a penalty or without a penalty. They certainly shouldn't do it without a penalty because that would just create chaos. And if they do, sorry, BC, you can expect your housing prices to climb even higher and higher and higher. So lots going on in the BC real estate market. I don't know if I'd want to be buying or selling there in the next couple of years, but I definitely know that if you are looking to purchase, now is probably the best time to do it. I don't know. It seems like the housing market in BC is going to continue to run up and run up and run up. It's one of the most desirable places in the world to live for good reason. I'm at a loss on this one. The BC market continues to be crazy, and I think the government intervention here could potentially have a significant negative impact with respect to all the things that they're actually trying to fix. So if you found this video useful, do me that favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, hit the like button so more people like you can see this video. Don't forget about the down payment challenge, and don't forget about the race to 25,000 subscribers either. We'll see you on the very next video. Cheers.